Well, good morning, friends and family. My name is Chris Shelley, and we welcome you to Lampeter Church of the Brethren this morning to really remember and to celebrate the lives of Carl M. and Anna Mae Diller, two of Christ's most faithful witnesses to have served the kingdom here on earth. We've also come to bring comfort to those and to support their family, extending words of encouragement, and to share our grief, and with each other take comfort in the never-ending love of Christ, who is our healer. Carl M. Diller, 94, of Willow Street, went home to be with the Lord on Saturday, April 4th, 2020, at Willow Valley Retirement Communities after a brief illness. Born in New Holland, he was the son of the late Charles and Anna Mae Diller. Carl began his career as an owner-sampler milk tester and learned the auctioneering trade to auction dairy cattle. He worked to build a successful auction service, Diller and Kreider Auctioneers, doing many estate sales and dairy herd dispersals. He was also a Holstein dairy cattle dealer, importing cattle from Canada and upstate PA. And before retirement, he was active in Kingsway Realty and then as an Amish taxi service. Anna Mae Diller, age 93, of Willow Street, went home to be with the Lord on Saturday, November 6th, 2021, at Willow Valley Retirement Communities after a long journey with dementia. Born in Willow Street, she was the daughter of the late Titus and Fanny Milan Burkholder. Her childhood was spent on the Burkholder farm at Milan's Corner. Anna Mae graduated from the West Lampeter High School and Elizabethtown College. Before starting her family, she was a laboratory technician at St. Joe's Hospital in Lancaster. Anna Mae was a homemaker and also partnered with Carl in his milk testing and auctioneering business, doing record keeping, clerking, and preparing many catalogs for Holstein dairy and herd dispersals. Carl and Ann were married for nearly 69 years until his death in April 2020. Carl and Ann were always active and faithful in their church, first at Mechanic Grove, Church of the Brethren, and then they were founding members of the congregation here at Lampeter Church of the Brethren. She taught junior high and adult Sunday school for many years and also prepared the monthly church newsletter. She was a choir member most of her life and also directed the church choir and instrument ensemble here. Carl and Ann served as deacons in the churches they attended and were members of the Gideon International of Lancaster South camp for many years, supporting the work of Bible distribution. During his 11 years as a Willow Street resident, Carl always had his harmonica handy to brighten any gathering. An important part of Ann's life was serving the Society of Farm Women, number 22, for over 60 years, where she held the offices of the local county and state levels. Her local society published the popular Dinner Bell series of cookbooks, which were assembled in her home. The family made many memories at Fallbrook Hunting Camp, and Carl and Ann enjoyed traveling to many destinations around the world. They captured all their family's memories in a book called Memories. Ann always loved music and had a love for playing the violin, performing many years with the Lancaster Senior Orchestra. Other hobbies included cooking holiday meals, baking, sewing, crocheting, and puzzles. They are survived by their sons, Dale E. Diller and wife Sandra of Lancaster, Jerry L. Diller, wife Tammy of Lancaster, John D. Diller and wife Marilyn of Oakland, Maryland, and James Diller, wife Jolene of Poolesville, Maryland. Grandsons, Shannon Diller, Derek Diller, Dustin Diller, Joshua Diller, Jonathan Diller, Jason Diller, Joseph Diller, Joel Diller, Jesse Diller, Benjamin Diller, Stephen Diller, and granddaughters Becky Diller and Ashley Diller, 12 great-grandchildren. It's a lot of sons, a lot of sons. In addition to his parents, Carl was preceded in death by sister Mildred Hartranft and brothers Lester and Harold Diller. In addition to their parents, Anna Mae was preceded in death by sisters Betty Reeves and Joyce Burkholder and brother John Burkholder. In their memory, please consider a contribution to Lampeter Church of the Brethren or the Gideons International. And the family wishes to thank the caring staff at Willow Valley Lakeside facility. I'm now going to invite Shannon Diller to come up and read Psalm 23. And then after that, Jason Diller to read 1 Corinthians 13.
Okay. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Jason, come on.
Good morning. 1 Corinthians 13. And now I will show you the most excellent way. If I speak in the tongues of men and angels, but not have love, I am, give me a second here. I'm going to start over, actually. And now I will show you the most excellent way. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but not love, I'm only a resounding gong or clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part, but when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, that then I shall know fully, even as I know fully. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love.
So we're going to do the song, How Can I Keep From Singing? This is a song that Mother indicated was one of her favorites. So you can all join along. We're going to have the words up on the screen. My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentations. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since Christ is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear that music ringing. It sounds and echoes in my soul. How can I keep from singing? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since Christ is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? What though my joys and comforts die, the Lord my Savior liveth. What though the darkness gather round, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my utmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since Christ is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? The peace of Christ makes fresh my heart, a fountain ever springing. All things are mine since I am his. How can I keep from singing? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since Christ is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing?
So that song we sang was a song that my mother had indicated was one of her favorites. She and my dad had written a book of memories about 10 years ago, and the two songs that she mentioned in there is the one we just sang, My Life Goes On, an Endless Song, How Can I Keep From Singing, and also The Love of God. And I have a trombone solo I'll be playing now, The Love of God. you. I think you all know me, Dale Diller, the oldest son. And so I'd just like to share about, I play the trombone, and my mother was always very active in music, and she played the violin, and she faithfully took me to trombone lessons every week when I was in high school. And as you can still see, I play trombone, and probably more now than ever. So just thank her for being faithful and supporting our music. I had also mentioned they wrote a book of memories that there's a copy out on the table in the lobby that about 10 years ago they captured all their memories throughout their life, and it's just really kind of encouraging and exciting to see all the different things they remembered and they passed on to us as things that we can read down through the years. She also made a ancestor history book that's also out in the lobby. It's pictures of like her ancestors. She labeled who everybody was and everybody in her family, and again appreciate that she did that to pass on to us. And so our dad was involved in the Gideons International for many years. I'm not sure exactly how many, but he was always faithful at going to their meetings every Saturday morning, a prayer meeting and a monthly camp meeting. And he liked to go to Millersville University every once or twice a year. They do a distribution of the little, what we call personal workers' testaments, the little New Testaments that you're probably familiar with, hand them out to college students, and he always liked to do that as well. So then 6 years ago, I got laid off from my job, and at the same time, my dad had kind of come out of the hospital from pneumonia, and he decided he couldn't drive anymore, so I didn't have an excuse not to get involved in the Gideons anymore. So I started to drive him to all the meetings. So we get up like 6 o'clock in the morning, Saturday mornings, and go to the Gideons prayer meetings, and over here up at the Willow Street restaurant, and many mornings sat around the table with the fellow Gideons there. And so, that's kind of one heritage that he kind of passed on to me now. So as he's gone, I'm involved in that organization and helping to get Bibles around. And I think one of the things the Gideons do is they can send cards out and donate money to buy Bibles. And so far, I think for just my mother, there's been about almost 50 Bibles been donated in her memory. So that's my remembrance. Thank you. Oh, and I want to bring my wife Sandy up here just to say a few words.
She loved her son playing the trombone. Oh my goodness, she would just get so much joy out of that. I just want to say my sons told me I should write it down, so that's why I wrote it down. I just want to say a couple of words about my in-laws. They were godly people. They put God always first. And the first thing I want to say is my father-in-law, he always treated me and my family very well, and we will miss him. We have millions of memories with him, and especially when they would come to our crazy, crazy family nights. And I would say, Grandpa, you know we're crazy, right? And he said they loved it. They just would just sit there and they just got entertained, And what can I say about my mother-in-law? And I could say this to all my sister-in-laws also, that she was our friend, and she was my buddy. She was our buddies. And even though the last 5 years we lost her mentally, she would, from the dementia, she always had that personality of her. And we would, she would come over, and she always thought I was having a baby. I said, Grandma, I'm 65 years old. But we would just laugh and laugh and laugh. And we're just so blessed, our whole family. And I could speak for all of them that the legacy that they left for us is amazing. Just the love they had for God, the love they had, commitment to each other. And I'll tell you, we'll miss them. We'll really miss them. And I say, we'll wait till we see them again, and we'll be with them for eternity. And thank you all for coming.
Number 2, Jerry here. How many funerals have we been to in our family over the years? There was John, and then Weldon, Betty. There was Ricky, Danny, and Mike, and then finally Evie. And over all these years, Mother and Dad just hung in there, and they were with us. And I count it such a blessing to have had them for all those years. 93 and 94. How many people can say my parents lived to be 93 and 94? And I really count that a blessing, and thank God that we had them for all those years. The other thing I count a huge blessing, and thank God, is that I had godly parents. They loved the Lord. Ever since I can remember, we started going to church down Mechanics Grove. It was a long drive, but they were faithful to take us there every Sunday. They started this church after I was off in college, but just appreciate the godly heritage that I have. I recently read a verse in 1 Chronicles 28:9 I'd like to share. It's really stood out to me, and this is David talking to his son Solomon. He says, "As for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father, and serve him with a whole heart and a willing mind. For the Lord searches the hearts, and he knows every intent of the thoughts. If you seek him, he will let you find him. But if you forsake him, he'll reject you forever." And I was just challenged how myself, I had a godly father, and I want to serve the God of my father, and I want to challenge my sons to serve my God as well and pass that on to them. So anyways, reflections on Mother and Dad. And I guess I'll start with Mother. I brought this violin up here. This was her violin. You might have saw it out back. It's a beautiful old violin. Of course, she played that for many years, played in an orchestra. And, I'll tell you a little story. When we were young, Mother had us all take piano lessons. You're going to learn piano. And so I thank my mother for getting me involved in music. I think we all have some musical talent and abilities that we got mainly from her. Dad played the harmonica too, but I think Mother was the biggest one that influenced us in music. And then I got into elementary school. I don't know, it's third grade or whatever. You have an opportunity to go into the band. And so, okay, I'd like to play a trumpet. So I did the audition. They test your abilities or whatever, and they said, we don't think you're going to make it on trumpet, so sorry, you don't make the grade. So I went home to Mother and said, well, I really wanted to play the trumpet. And her first suggestion is, well, I could get you violin lessons. You could learn to play the violin. Well, for an 8-year-old boy, playing the violin that sounds kind of like a girlish thing, so I really didn't have an interest in playing violin. I wanted to play the trumpet. So good old Mother, and she was always one that supported you and encouraged you. She believed you could do whatever you set your mind to. So she said, okay, we're going to get you trumpet lessons. And so she took me to a private teacher, and I had trumpet lessons for a year. And after a year, then I went back and tried out the next year for the band, and I made the grade. So I played trumpet the whole way through my school years. I was never very good. Dale is very polished, sounds very professional on the trombone. I was never that good at the trumpet. Maybe I should have listened to the guy in third grade and gave up the idea of trumpet. But anyway, I played trumpet, and then in college I picked up the guitar, started playing that. And over the years, then I started getting interest in the violin. I'd go home and pick up Mother's violin and just sort of started playing tunes on it. Never had any lessons or anything. I was never very good either, but I enjoy just fiddling with the fiddle. And so then older, as the years went by, then finally Mother got there. She couldn't play anymore. I gave her the violin. Here, you want to try to play? And she lifted up. Oh, I can't hold it. My arm's not strong enough. So she had to give up the violin, and she gave it to me. And it's a prized possession that I have her violin. And one of my last memories was a few days before she passed. I went to visit her, and I took the violin, and I sat there and played a few songs for her. She was mostly sleeping, a little bit responsive, but I believe she heard it, and hopefully it was a comfort to her. But in her memory, I'd like to play a song. And I must say that I almost wasn't going to play this because, I'll warn you, I'm not very good with violin. But my brothers all said, oh, there is the violin. My brothers all said, hey, you got to play the violin, just in memory of your mother. This is for her. So I'm warning you, I can't play very well, but let me see. I can play the scale anyway. Most applause I ever had for playing the violin. As I was thinking about what I was going to play on the violin, and I think about what are some songs that were meaningful to Mother, and a song that really came to my mind is the song "Brighten the Corner Where You Are." And those of you who are farm women, I know there's 2 or 3 come in and introduce themselves and say, "Oh, I'm a farm woman." This is their theme song, "Brighten the Corner." And I thought, why don't we sing this? And I'm just going to play with the guitar, and I think the words maybe appear on the screen. You can sing along. Do not wait until some deed of greatness you may do. Do not wait to shed your lights afar. To the many duties ever near you now be true. Brighten the corner where you are. Brighten the corner where you are. Brighten the corner where you are. Someone far from harbor you may guide across the bar. Brighten the corner where you are. Brighten the corner where you are. Brighten the corner where you are. Someone far from harbor you may guide across the bar. Brighten the corner where you are. And the reason I wanted to sing that song is I think it really just captures Mother's life, really, in a snapshot. Brighten the corner. She was always brightening things up. She was always encouraging people, and you always wanted to see the best in everyone. And all through our lives, she always encouraged us in everything we did, even if we weren't good at it. But one memory I did want to share was that my son Jonathan joined the Marine Corps. Now, that's a little bit of a stretch for someone who's from a Mennonite or a Brethren background, but my mother was totally supportive of him, even though she was a Brethren. And he went off to boot camp in South Carolina, Paris Island. When he graduated, they invite family to come, and our wife and our kids, we went all down to see his graduation. And sure enough, Mother said, "I want to go along." And she was, 70, 80 years old. I don't know how old she was, but, "Are you sure you want to go, Mother?" "Yeah, I want to go." And so we took her along. She went down to support her grandson, and that's just the way she was. She just wanted to support everyone in whatever they did. So I guess I better share a few things about Dad. And sorry if I'm going over my 10 minutes, but I think from Dad, there's several things that I learned or took after him. I think the first had to do with cows. Of course, he was big into cows. That was part of his livelihood. And I took after that. I wouldn't say that I love cows. I like cows. My job is a dairy nutritionist. I mean, I worked as a dairy farmer for some years, and then got into working for a feed mill. But he'd buy cows and bring them down. We would get them ready for auction. I remember clipping cows, washing cows. We'd auction them. We'd load them up in trucks, and man, that was a big thing. And I enjoyed working with him. I always thought maybe that he was a little disappointed that I didn't want to stick around and take on that business from him and grow into that, but I decided I want to go off to college and do something else. But just the whole interest in working with cows, I can pin on him. Of course, he was an auctioneer, and I have other memories of going to auctions, being the runner boy. They'd auction something and we'd run it back and give it to the person. I remember one sale we were at, and I ended up laying down on a hay bale up in the front of the where he was auctioning, and he looked at her and said, "Boy, there's time to sleep tonight. Get back up there." And he went on auctioning, and so we have many fond memories of auctions. I didn't take up any auctioneering, but and one thing I was going to share about cows is that we had some nice vacations because of cows. Now, Dad wasn't one to want to go for a week on a vacation or whatever, but there's one instance that we went to California because there was a Holstein convention in California. Now, we wouldn't have just gone to California, but this is a good opportunity to go to convention. Well, I'll take the family, we'll have a vacation. That's the Diller mentality. Well, if we can weasel something into something, we're not going to go do it on its own. And that was very, very fond memories of traveling in a camper. I think there's some slides on there about a camper and traveling to California. And then at least once or twice he took us up to Canada. He was out buying cows, but he took us along, and we rented a little cabin by a lake, and Mother and kids did their own thing, and Dad went off and bought cows, but it was a family vacation. Anyways, and the other thing I'd like to share that I sort of took after or caught from my dad is cutting firewood, burning wood, and heating your house with wood. I mean, we're very conservative people. If I can get something for free, I will. Well, I can go cut wood for free. I can heat my home without having to pay this oil bill every month. Great. And Dad, for many, many years, cut wood and had a wood stove or a wood furnace. And I remember working with him, gathering wood many times. And when I had the opportunity to put my own wood burner in, I started cutting wood and heating my house, and still do today. So I can thank my dad for that as well. I better get down now. I think that's all I was going to share, but thanks for bearing with me.
Well, 25 bid 30 now, 30 now, 35. 35 bid 40 now, 40 now, 40 now, 45. What do you think? 45. $50. We go 50 now, 55 now, 55. Sold over there for $50. I'll tell you what you bought after the service. I'm John. I'm number 3. And Carl Diller, auctioneer. And Anna Mae, the clerk. That's the way a lot of people knew our parents. But to me, they were mom and dad. Yeah, they were mom and dad. Early memories of mom and dad were going to auctions a lot. When we were little, we'd stay at my grandmother's, and they would go to sales. And I always wondered what these sales were. And finally, I got to go to an auction and see what it was all about. And us kids, they'd take us along, and we'd run around the barn and the house or whatever it was, and try to stay out of trouble, or should I say, maybe try to keep from getting caught. But we had a great time at the auctions. As we got older, Dad put us on the payroll. As Jerry said, we'd hold up the item that he was selling, and he'd sell it, and then we'd run it back to the person that got it. We also took the sheets, the clerking sheets from the outside clerk to my mom, who was, either in a kitchen or in a stripping room. Now I know it's not what you think, okay? It was a tobacco stripping room she was in, okay? So I just want to make sure you knew that. But so we spent a lot of time at auctions, and after the auction, of course, we always had the job of locating all the things that Dad bought. And he had a pile over here, then he had a pile over here, and we take it all and we load it up on the pickup truck, and then we could take it home. And if you would come to our house and you ask Mother, where did this come from? Oh, Carl got it at an auction. They had a lot of stuff they had gotten from an auction. So when I was, when Dad was, one thing about Dad is he wasn't a big talker, and he doesn't joke around a lot. He did some, but he didn't do a lot. But you get him at an auction in front of a crowd with a microphone in one hand and an antique china in the other, he would bring you to tears. He would bring joy to anybody who would listen. A couple of a few favorite sayings he would say is, "Winker, blinker, flop your ear." Another one would be when somebody would stop bidding, come on, it's only money, it's only money. Of course, when I tried to tell him that when we went to the store, it didn't work very good. The other thing, if you were bidding on a piece and you were trying to see, who the other person was that was bidding, he said, look at me, you can look at them on Sunday. So he was, if you went to, the other thing was, I'd heard it more than once where people would say, why'd you come to the auction? What'd you come for? He says, oh, I came to see the show. And if you go to a Diller Kreider auction, you definitely have a great show to watch. When I was growing up, people would ask me, do you want to be an auctioneer when you grow up? My answer was always, no, I don't want to be an auctioneer. But after I got out of high school and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, Dad said, how would you like to go to auction school? I thought about it a little bit, and for some reason I said yes. So I went to auction school down in Nashville, Tennessee. I was like a 17-year-old boy. He put me on the airplane. I went down there. Can you imagine a 17-year-old boy in the middle of Nashville, Tennessee? I got an education. But went to auction school, learned how to auctioneer, came back, and I worked with Dad for probably about 12 years, helping with sales. We traveled all over Lancaster County and northern Pennsylvania, and had a great time, had a great experience for me, great learning experience, and to learn his work ethic and his, how hard he would work. And one thing about him, if if things didn't go quite right, and you didn't make any money that day, he said, well, if you don't make it on the corn, you'll make it up on the wheat. If you don't make it on the wheat, you'll make it up on the petunias or whatever. So he always, he never quit, never gave up. He always stuck at it, and no matter what he did. And Mom, early memories of Mom were, of course, like the other boys said, was of music. Now, my experience with band was a little different than Jerry's. I went to try out for the band, and I had my heart set on saxophone. And I got there, and Mr. McKenzie, he looked at my crooked teeth and said, "You can't play saxophone." So he gave me a trumpet. So I played trumpet with Jerry. And like Jerry said, he wasn't very good at trumpet, and I wasn't very good either. Dale was always first chair, first trombone. Jerry was next to last chair, third trumpet, beside me, because I was the last chair. So, but we had a great time. I mean, Mother definitely gave us all, good musical background, and I'm sure me and Jerry could have been really good at trombone if we would have practiced. I took my trumpet to school the first day of school, and I brought it home the last, so it didn't do very good at practicing. The other thing about Mom was she was, always a positive attitude, always would stick up for what she wanted to do. She'd come to all our gymnastics meets and music events. She was very supportive. And she always had a positive attitude. And the other thing she did, she knew the way to the emergency room, knew where that x-ray machine was, especially when we tried playing Evel Knievel or we'd get on the pony and it took off and we fell off or whatever. But I know Dad always said, "There's another x-ray, Bill." Oh, one time I decided I was running to take the mini bike through the barbed wire fence. So I came back up, and Mom, she was patching me up, and she was so positive. "Oh, it's not that bad. It could have been worse. If it would have, wire just would have been a little higher, it would have cut off your head. So you're not too bad." And then, of course, she didn't want to make me feel that bad. So it wasn't too long after that, she ran through the fence with the mini bike as well. And my brother Jim, who's coming up next, he didn't want to be left out, so after that, he ran through the fence with a mini bike. The thing about it was, we never could figure out who kept putting that barbed wire fence across our mini bike trail. Oh, where am I at here? Oh, one of the earliest memories I have of Dad, I was probably 3 or 4, and we were in Refton, and we had a snowstorm. And I remember I was down in the basement with him. We were putting on our boots to go out to the barn. Of course, I couldn't get my boots on very good, so he come over, bent over, and he put my boots on for me and probably picked me up and said, "Attaboy." Then we walked out to the barn, and I remember, trying to follow in his footsteps. And he had some big footsteps. And it seems like throughout my childhood and throughout my adult life, even still now, I'm still trying to follow in his footsteps. Whether it be when we were kids, taking a walk through the woods, or teaching me how to drive the pickup down through the field to the barn, or when I was auctioneering with him and tried to imitate how he auctioneered, and then in my own business and business practice, just his attitude of how to stick with it and never give up. If I wouldn't have had that training, I'm sure I never would have stuck with my business and be where I am today. So I really, really appreciate that from him. Another thing about Mom and Dad, which I'm sure you all know, and just Jerry alluded to a little bit, was their love for the Lord. And, if Dad were here right now, he'd probably say, paths might not pass again. So I just want to ask you, if you would die today, do you know where you would end up in eternity? I've seen him do that a lot of times with people and hand them a track. I know where he is. I know where Mom is. And they're having a great reunion up there. And I know I'm going to be there someday too. And I hope you are too. The other thing that me and my dad had in common was we played harmonica. So I'm going to do a little hymn medley for you right now. Thank you.
That's a hard act to follow. First chair in the harmonica section. Well, I have some notes that I took in these last months when I was coming up here to see Mom, and I have some notes that I took after Dad died. Unfortunately, I didn't get them all kind of in one place. I'm going to be juggling my phone and my notes. But, and it's a little bit scattered, so I'm just going to say some random stuff here. And then I'm going to end with the poem that I wrote for them in their 50th wedding anniversary, which was about 20 years ago. So, Mom, first of all, Chris, I wanted to express appreciation for you. There you are. I really appreciated the call that we had, the four of us boys with you, and planning out the service, and it was just a really nice time for the four of us to talk collectively about what we remembered about Mom. And so I was just struck how consistent it was when we kind of went around this virtual circle over the phone in terms of what we thought of when we remember Mom. And I think I'm repeating a lot of things that were already said, but and she was always had a positive attitude, always looked on the bright side. She was nurturing, comforting, reassuring. She gave all of us the love of music. And she always saw the good in other people, even if most other people thought it wasn't deserved. Another thing is she always kept her cool. She never panicked, kept things in perspective. What stood out for me the most was her kind and caring and nurturing manner. There's a couple of short stories I'll tell that make me think of those things. And I think there's a few Burke holders in the audience today, but Mike and I were good buddies growing up. And for a spell, I don't know, we must have been 12 or something, but we were into skateboarding. And so Mike and I had our skateboards, and we were up at Mike's house and, playing around with our skateboards. And we decided somehow to tie a rope to the skateboard. I guess we're trying to invent some new way of skateboarding. But so one of us would pull the other one, would tow the other person on the skateboard. So we were towing each other around in the driveway at John and Evie's. And so it was my turn to pull Mike, and so, I was pulling him down the driveway, and for some reason he decided to bail out. And so he jumped off the skateboard. And there was enough of tension in this rope that the skateboard managed to cruise into the back of my heel as it was nice and stretched out, and lacerated part of my Achilles tendon. And it hurt, and and I couldn't walk. I remember Mike helping me hobble around, and somehow I ended up at home. So this happened like at 2 p.m. and here I am, at home that night. It was a Saturday, and Mom was like, we got to go get that taken care of. And I'm like, no, I was like dreading, the thought of like going to the doctor, because I didn't know what this was going to involve, getting all this stitched up. And I'm like, oh, I'm fine, I can walk. Oh, no, I really can't walk. And I was like scared to death. So we went down to Quarryville, Dr. Paul Herr, and he turned on all the lights. There's nobody else around. It was just me and Mom and Paul Herr. And that was probably the most pain I had experienced at that point in my life, and maybe most of my life. But I was so scared. I was, just one of the most hardest times in my life. And Mom was right there. She was holding my hand, you're going to get through this, it's okay, and she stuck with me and helped me get patched up. And another favorite memory is about a year later. I was 13 years old, just in that, just starting to get into that zone when, girls are important, and, being cool is, what you think about a lot. And we had a trip to the dentist, and dentist said, your teeth are really messed up. And you really need braces, or, if you don't get braces, your front teeth are probably going to fall out. Because they had some pretty nice buck teeth there, and you guys might remember. And of course, I was devastated to think about having to get braces and entering, 7th grade or whatever it was. This is like a really big deal for me. So, after the dentist broke the news, we get out to the car, and Mom says, hey, it's a nice afternoon. You know what? We should play hooky this afternoon. Do you want to go play miniature golf? And so we went over to Village Greens in Strasburg, and she took me around, played miniature golf. I didn't have to go back to school that day. And 2 months ago, I actually drove her back there. She sat in the car, but I went and got her some ice cream. Mom rarely got mad or lost her temper. Friends would often say, I wish I had your mom. You're so lucky. She was really a dear soul. I think another big theme for me in her life, and Dad's too, was leadership. She was such a leader, such a great example. The choir here at this church, I remember, she had the choir members to our house every Wednesday night, and that was like a special time of the week when everybody would come over, and they would sit around in our living room, and she would direct the choir. She actually went and took a course, I don't know where it was, but she took a course in choir directing, and she took that initiative and created that experience here, and then later on, she led the orchestra here at church. Of course, she was working, as others have said, worked really closely with Dad and his auction, and took on a lot of responsibility, along with 4 boys. My goodness, so that was another area, and then farm women. She was very dedicated to that organization and took on leadership roles there. There was the cookbook project where everybody would come to our house, and all these ladies would show up, and Mom organized order out of chaos, and somehow we ended up with all these wonderful cookbooks. The Dinner Bell and Dinner Bell Rings Again, the Encore, which are sitting out there. So she, the other women would come and put the pages together, but she orchestrated everything, took charge of getting the supplies, scheduling the work, and delivering all the boxes of cookbooks to the publisher. And then, of course, for many years, she did the church bulletin here at Lampeter, and later on did the church newsletter. She was Curtis Dubel's right hand for many years. And I remember always just being so proud of her. I think I also want to mention our grandparents as well, Fanny and T.K. Burkholder. Like someone else said, she often took us there when we were young, too young to go to the auctions. They were great examples, and really loved their family as well as Mom and Dad did their own family. And I just remember my grandmother, because we spent a lot of time at Grandma's house. My mom was a lot like her. She was very bright, cheery, warm, and welcoming to all who passed through her front door as well. Fallbrook was a place that we loved to go to in upstate Pennsylvania, and many fun memories being there together as a family, many fun memories of hunting adventures to Fallbrook, and then Jake, who's here with us today, Jake and Verna, would come with Jolene and me once a year, and the 6 of us would go to Fallbrook for a long weekend. That was at least 10 years we did that. The last few years were rough for Mom, with her dementia. And, it was sad to slowly lose her like that. But at the same time, and someone else said it as well, she was still the same person underneath. Every once in a while she would, have a breakthrough with like a lucid thought or be able to put a full sentence together. It was only about 1% of the time, but even the other 1 or 2% when the words were all jumbled up, it was still anime. It was still the same warm, caring soul underneath. So those were my thoughts on Mom. And for Dad, again, just reading kind of some random thoughts about Carl Diller. So who was Carl Diller? Lucky. Just in general, he was a lucky guy, especially when he played the dice game. Popular. Everyone knew Carl Diller. If you were Carl Diller's son, everybody knew who you were. They loved to come to his auctions. He brought smiles to their faces. So many catchy phrases, I'm going to repeat all of them. But, hey, it's only money. And someone was unsure if they wanted to keep bidding on something. Or wink or blink or flop your ear. Another one you didn't say was crickets. When everyone was done bidding, or no one put in a good bid, or any bid at all. Then there was always a quarter man, nickel man, cash man. when he held up something and nobody wanted to buy it. And then he often nicknamed the frequent bidders. Hey, red shirt. Hey, pioneer hat over there. How about a bid? And of course, 39's the buyer when he bought something with his own buyer number. And this is something I remember towards the end of his life. Thinking about it was a refrain that came back subconsciously to me. At the end of the sale, around 4 o'clock, when a lot of people were leaving and there wasn't a whole lot left, he'd say, "Will soon be done." And I remember that about him and his life as an auction. Another thing he would say sometimes is, "Oh, I'm all thumbs." So Dad didn't have a lot of fine motor skills. But he was more intuition and hunch than he was precision and detail. More passion and action on his intuitions than overthinking and second-guessing himself, like me. He was charismatic, people magnet. He made people smile. He endeared people to himself. He was outgoing, friendly, always curious about the other person, always upbeat and positive with everyone. Like I said before, intuition. He loved to follow his nose. He was often on an adventure. He had a knack for picking the winners. He didn't overthink things. He just moved ahead, give it a try. When I was little, I remember he was mysterious. I remember watching him, walk past the coat closet out to the garage and get in the truck. And I never always knew where he was going, but he was always on an adventure somewhere, always off on a mission or off to a farm chore. So I ended up after 10 years, on and off of farms in my early years, went off to college and ended up getting in ultimately to finance and business. And one of the things that really I think of a lot about Dad was that he trusted me with important things like his finances. And he never asked many questions. He never preferred to go, with an outside experienced professional. He just trusted me that my decisions were good. And, he had faith in me. He had faith in us. It's a random thought. He gave me a chainsaw for Christmas one year after I was married. And that might not sound like a lot, but I was never allowed to run the chainsaw when I was at home. So when he gave me the chainsaw for Christmas, I felt like, wow. He believed in me. He was a teacher. He taught me how to drive a tractor, taught me how to drive a car, taught me how to mend fences on the farm, taught me how to split firewood, how to build a fire in the wood stove that we heated our house with over the winter. He respected me, and so as many of you know, I ended up going a little bit different path when it came to political views and religious views. And while that was hard for him, he respected me and he accepted me. And he never looked back, and he never judged me for that. And that meant a lot to me. I think near the end of his life, as we were just entering the COVID crisis and the recession, it reminded me a lot of Dad and thinking about, all of the periods in his life that he experienced those kinds of things. I mean, he grew up during the Depression. He was born in 1925. There were other rough periods. The 1973 oil crisis, the recession in 1980 and 82, 1987 stock market crash. And Dad was always tuned in. He was always curious. And, even though he might not have been an economist or anything, he always paid attention to those things. And he took it, down to a practical level. He was very conservative, and he was disciplined with saving his money. I remember going to the bank with him in Willow Street and dropping off our deposits in the bank at Willow Street. And I remember, making 15% interest on your checking account. But that was a discipline that Dad instilled in us. And I think also for me, his passion for buying and selling things kind of ended up translating into the career that I had in finance with business and investing. Going to miss them. And so this is the poem that I wrote 20 years ago. I was going to try to add another ending to it, but I didn't get around to it. So this is how I read it for them at their 50th wedding anniversary. They were busy young sweethearts, with the day coming fast when they'd tell the whole world that their new love would last. She had busied herself as a seamstress, you see, sewing dresses of bridesmaids and planning with glee. And he, with his business of novel milk testing, also prepared for this day without resting. So the story begins on a fine day in May with a groom named Carl and a bride, Anna May. With a trip to the north did they both celebrate, as they should have, a swell couple, simply first rate. Then to a tenant house both settled down on the home farm in Willow Street, nice little town. A couple years later to Refton they came, where Anne had to rescue some cows from a train. Soon after they moved to the Pike, 4 boys, wow, and then 30 years in the place they live now. He was an auctioneer, she was his clerk. For years did they teach us of humble teamwork, like the binding of cookbooks with farm women gals, or pulling off auctions with lots of his pals. 39's the buyer. Is that what he said? She'd know right away, it's more junk for the shed. And leadership, too, did they both demonstrate, like farm women president of PA, the state. This pair's taught us lots about life, to be sure, their lessons of faith and of service endure, like their passion to build up this church through the years. They were here from the start, yes, true pioneers. She led the choir, and he sang the bass. They opened their home Wednesday nights with such grace. Gideon's, Sunday school, worship, love feast. Did you know that he typically fasts once a week? They aren't always serious and somber, it's true, especially with family, their favorite crew. Like the trips they would go on, allow me to boast. Kentucky, Alaska, Niagara, West Coast. In the year 69 to Grand Canyon and back, where the youngest of sons nearly lost his dear cat. But it's Fallbrook, PA, where they go when fun calls. He likes to see bears. She loves climbing falls. This story's near finished, but still not complete. They think 13 grandkids are really quite neat. And soon to be 10 great-grandchildren. At Christmas, on a goose chase those kids does she send. At Easter, an egg hunt before the day ends. There's much more to say, but I think I'll stop here. The fine pair of sweethearts to all has grown dear. So happy 5-0. Have we said it before? You've given us great memories. May there be many more. Miss you, Mom and Dad.
We do want to allow for a couple minutes for people to share. So if you have something, a memory of Carl or Ann that you'd like to share, there are some gentlemen in the back with microphones. Just raise your hand if you have a memory that you'd like to share.
All right. I'm Shannon. I'm the first grandchild, I guess. I was really thinking about just like walking into this, like obviously as grandkids go, I have the most memories. So I was just thinking about like, well, do I share memories? Do I say whatever? And I was like, well, how about if I just kind of explain, like, well, what did I learn from these two people? I feel like we heard a lot of memories, and it's just, what did I learn from these two people? From my grandfather, I learned to just play the darn harmonica. And what I mean by that is he just was who he was, no matter where you were. He did not care if you did not like it. If he wanted to, I mean, there's pictures up there, I don't know if anybody saw it, where it was my oldest son, Carter. It was his first birthday, and we were singing happy birthday, and he just got up and played the harmonica. Like, he doesn't care. And it reminds me in this kind of way of just thinking that, like, you can't just assume that someone is going to notice you for who you are. You've got to put yourself out there. And my grandfather always put himself out there so that people knew who he was. I'll never forget this big new gym area in this church. Before it was built, there was he came out of retirement to auctioneer when they were like, I guess they were selling baked goods or something. And it was just everyone, like, people came not even for the baked goods. They came to see him do that because he just always was who he was. My grandmother was probably the most relational person I've ever met in my life. Hearing everybody talk about like the trips that they went on and various things that they did, and how many of those trips were what I would call relational trips, where especially once she had grandkids, and it was like no matter where we were, she would end up there. I lived in South Carolina. I think Dustin lived in England, and she came there. I mean, like, no matter where we were, she would end up there. And she was the most accepting person. Like, it just didn't matter who you were when you went there. And I think, so yeah, I think my takeaways would be, like, be who you are, play the darn harmonica, okay? And just be relational, because it doesn't, like, nothing else really matters if you don't have that. So those are the things that I thought of over here.
Mine may be a little less thought through, but I have a few memories of my grandma and my grandpa that I was going to share. So my grandpa, I don't think we were, like, at least at our age, grandkids, I think we were a lot closer to my grandma, but there's things that I definitely remember about my grandfather, and he was definitely the hand-washing police. Every time we were about to eat, you'd always hear him go, wash hands, wash hands. And I mean, anytime Ben and Stephen would come into town, I mean, Josh and I would always want to, like, sleep over at Grandma's with Ben, and we'd always go to Grandma because she'd always say yes, but you'd always hear Grandpa way in the back in his office, and he'd go, "No promises." And Grandma would always go, "Oh my." But anytime, you wanted to earn money, you wouldn't get a whole lot, but Grandpa always had work for you. I remember, Josh and I hung out all the time, and I remember being at Grandma's with Josh, and Grandpa said, "I've got work for you boys," and he handed us a pair of gloves, and there was all this like thorny brush that he wanted us to put on the burn pile. And we got like our arms cut up, we moved all this stuff, and we each got a quarter. We were like, great, I can buy half of the can of A&W root beer that she'll give me later. But, you know, Grandpa always taught us, you know, to work for what we want to get. And I think, you know, we may have not been extremely close to, you know, Grandpa growing up, but we were extremely close to our parents. And he is what, you know, Grandma and Grandpa is what instilled what our parents are and what we've learned to grow from our parents and learn from our parents. So, I mean, there's definitely many things I appreciated about my grandpa. And I think definitely in the later years, you know, him coming to our family nights, we got a lot closer. You know, I got a lot closer to Grandpa. He really opened up. You know, being an adult, our relationship with Grandpa was definitely a lot different than, you know, like 12-year-olds running around crazy. You know, I think he would kind of hermit to his office a little bit because we were insane, you know, growing up. But as an adult, we definitely had a much different relationship with Grandpa. Grandma, on the other hand, I think Grandma was like my favorite person in the world growing up. I mean, I loved being at Grandma's house. I mean, we'd always just barge in and like, Grandma! And she'd like, yeah, in the back. And we'd always go right to the kitchen and see if there was molasses cookies. Yep. I mean, I would like fight someone over molasses cookies because they're amazing. But, I mean, like Shannon said, I mean, Grandma would do whatever for her grandkids. She would be wherever for them. You know, she just had this really loving, easygoing mentality. Like you said, I lived in England for 3 years. She came to England. It was right before my twins were born, so they all came out to hopefully be there when they were born, but they missed them by a week. But she sat in our English house, and we got to see London, and she just hung out, and she never complained. She just was glad to be with us. And I lived in Oklahoma for 3 years. She came with my parents to Oklahoma, and I remember when I was in Oklahoma, I would buy and sell like dirt bikes and four-wheelers. And I mean, I still do that. But in Oklahoma, I did it, and they don't have state inspection down there. So I had this Ford Ranger with no exhaust and no air conditioning, and it was in the summer. And I was like, I got this deal, and my parents and my grandma was down there, and I said, I got this deal on this four-wheeler, I'm going to go get it. And my mom was like, yeah, take Grandma. I'm like, you want to go, Grandma? And she was like, I go, well. So she came, and she didn't say a word. I mean, like, no complaining. It was like 100 degrees in Oklahoma heat, no air conditioning. I had the windows down, my truck with no exhaust, like, blaringly loud, and she was just, like, glad to be with me. And I, like, went and, like, loaded up this four-wheeler, and she was just having a great time, like, just being with me. And that's always what I remember about her. She wouldn't complain. She was just glad to be with you, and she was always glad to have, you know, people there. So, I mean, they'll both definitely be missed.
There's not too many talking, but I would just like to make the family aware of something that being a member of the church here, your grandfather may not have always, like at a business meeting, he may not have always agreed with something that was being voted on. It may have gone against his wishes, but he was behind it. After that, he was behind it. I just thought that was something about Carl that always impressed me. He may not have agreed with it, but after it was voted upon, he was behind it. And John, I found out today from one of the family, I thought you got the harmonica business from your dad, only to find out that especially if there's people of the church and other people, Carl got it from John. I thought that was interesting.
So I'd like to invite Pastor John Hostetter to come up and share. He spent the majority of the time with Carl and Ann here before I came, so he'll come and share some memories.
There's really actually little to add because I think it was great to hear, and it's a real testimony to the legacy of the two of them to hear. When Chris said something to me, I think at the end of last week, a particular thought came actually out of Robert Louis Stevenson's statement on a well-lived life. And so I'm just going to walk through a couple of things that he said, and to me that Carl and Ann demonstrated, like what is a well-lived life. And so I think Carl and Ann really modeled that for us here at Lampeter. So, first of all, well-lived life is individuals who gain the respect of others. I remember particularly, and I think actually Pastor Chris was the one who set it up, and I'm not sure exactly what was going on, but I remember particularly a time when there was a series of couples, and my wife and I were up here on stage, and Carl and Ann were on stage, and I think it was something to do with marriage or something like that. Well, the attention went to Carl and Ann. They just emanated. The rest of us were humbled by the graciousness of how they modeled the joy of marriage. And I think people were drawn in, and there was just a level of respect because they modeled the kind of life that people longed for. Secondly, not only do they gain the respect of others, they leave the world better than they found it, or a rescued soul. In your mind's eye, you remember particular pictures of images of people that you experienced over the year. And one of my images of Carl, when I come in Sunday morning, is him walking down that hall and always asking me, "Are you coming to pray this morning?" And then ended up in that one room over there. Every Sunday morning, he was in that one room over there by him, whether anybody else showed up, and praying. I just can't imagine the fruit that Carl is now enjoying as a result of his prayer life. The beginning of this church, and he loved to tell that story, really was born out of prayer. Carl and Ann were key prayer warriors in the foundation of this church. And the other picture I have, and I can't actually remember except what the occasion was, I just remember Carl coming to me at the end of a service, and it was a service where we baptized a number of people, and it was just one of those kind of services where people were expressing their commitment to Christ. And Carl, it seemed like that really brought him great joy. He said to me, "Now that's what church is all about." To me, both Carl and Ann had a love for the scriptures, and they modeled that here. And both of them had a really deep interest in history. Carl, if you were around here, Carl would never let us forget the history of those early days. I think almost on any occasion, he would remind us how this church was founded. But I was really interested to hear about the book Memory and the other one, because Ann would come over here and she would get Shirley Kreider to run things off. And often she would be talking and they would be talking, and I would get brought into the conversation, and Ann would be having difficulty with formatting something like that. And one of the fun things that I did get to do on occasions with Ann was I would stop over to their house, because she was having some issue with the computer, and help her figure out how to get something formatted or laid out in a particular way that she wanted it. It just seemed to me that what they did was they built within us an appreciation of those who have went before us. and that how we have today, and we're blessed today because of those who lived before us, were faithful. And you as a family, because of what Carl and Ann lived, you are blessed today. The third one is that I have is people who live a well-lived life. They never lack appreciation for beauty, and they don't fail to express it. And this, I'm not going to say much about it other than I particularly appreciated Ann's organization of the orchestra, and not so much that a part of our worship, particularly in my earlier years. So those of you who know me in terms of like planning worship, this was always kind of a little bit of, to me, funny. Because I like to maintain a flow in worship. So I would tell Ann, listen, when this is happening, get the orchestra ready so that when this is over, that you are ready to go. That never happened. The whole time I was here, she would, and part of it was probably out of respect of what was doing. She would always wait till everything was done, and then I would look over at her. Yeah, you can go ahead and get everybody ready to get going. But she just had I think, a love to create beauty and to share it in the worship. Another one was that a well-lived life is people who laugh often. And I won't say, Carl did bring laughter with his auctioneering here at the church. That happened on a number of occasions, and just to create a fun, kind of festive environment. But I also remember Ann's laugh. And even right before I left and visited her, and it seemed like that laughter, and I don't know how it was in the last 2 years, but up until that point, just never left. And so she just kind of had that, I don't know how to describe it, but I just loved it. And, because there's something like radiated a happiness. The other one that you all mentioned is look for the best in others. Carl and Ann, I felt complete support and encouragement from them all the years that I was here as pastor. And when I first got here, Ann was still doing the newsletter. And the patience that she had with me to because I had to write pastor pens and stuff like that. And she had to keep after me, this is the deadline, I need it by then. But very gracious, very supportive. And the two of them, I deeply appreciated over the years. And then the last one that I want to mention was who loved much. This church, as well as my wife and I, have been blessed because of their generosity and just their kindness. And so they truly lived a well-lived life. Erwin McManus said, a life well lived is the most exquisite work of art. And when I think about Carl and Ann, I think about two individuals who are an exquisite work of art by the way they live their life. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 9, he said, I don't run aimlessly. I just, lived life purposefully. They did. And the end result was that they received an incorruptible crown, which is what Paul talks about all of us pursuing. And to me, their lives are an exquisite work of art, and today they're enjoying the incorruptible crown.
mic still on? It can be. There you go. And is the guitar on too? Yep. Thanks. So yeah, John, we all remember that laugh. It was a lot of wheezing, and you thought that maybe she stopped breathing for a second. So I wasn't sure if I was going to play this song, but it's a song that when I first heard it, it made me think of someone towards the end of their life, and a follower of Christ, and what they may have been thinking, what they may have been praying, and it's called a prayer for grace. And one thing that I always remember about my grandparents was, and I know this is hard to believe, but I was kind of a naughty child, and they always had such grace for me, and I know a lot of my cousins, my brothers, no matter what you did in their life, whether they approved of it or not, they always gave you grace. Grandma always had, her loving arms open and gave you a kiss, and, I could always rely on Grandpa to see Grandpa, with a big smile and his hand out for a handshake, and, he'd say, "Hey, Derek," and he just had this big smile on his face. One time, when I was helping a buddy out power washing at Willow Valley, and when I was on this 65-foot man lift and I was power washing the building, and I said, "Wait a second, I know that sleeping man down there on that bench. That's Carl. That's my grandpa." So I came down, and I had all these, man lift straps on and whatever, and I said, "Grandpa," and he was startled because, he's sleeping on the bench like that, and he was with his friends who were already also half asleep. I guess that's what you do at a retirement home. But he was just so excited, and he wanted to introduce me to everybody. All his friends around there, and he was so proud, and I just remember that about my grandparents. Again, no matter what we did, no matter what I did in my life, they were always so gracious. So this song's called A Prayer for Grace. And I think this may have been, a prayer that Grandma and Grandpa may have had to the Lord, towards the end of their life. If I could make just one request that would mark all the days I have left, I'd rather not be known for treasures and fame, or trophies and accolades I know will fade. Instead, I would rather be known by the kindness and love that I've shown, to be known for patience and long suffering, a giver of life by the words that I speak. So with every
I was the youth director here at Lampeter for 9 years before I became the senior pastor. I was the one that asked Carl and Ann if they would come up and share reflections on life after dating and marriage for 50 plus years. And they easily stole the show. Most of the time, Carl, with little stories, and he would kind of get off track and then say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've gone on another rabbit trail." And then he would come back. The other thing that we often had Carl do, I'm not from this area, so I didn't realize he was an auctioneer, but he did our youth auctions here where they would share their talents and skills. And so this humble man would walk to the front. I've never seen him do this before. He only prayed with me out in the Welcome Center. This humble man walks to the front, pulls out a handkerchief, covers the microphone, and goes right off into auctioneer mode. And I've never seen someone switch gears so fast in his life, but Carl did. And he would say things like, "Yeah, it's only money." And the other thing he would say was he would just pause and be like, "Now, come on, what are the children worth to you?" And of course, the hands would go back up, and then he would continue on. The other thing that he did was often, and I think he gave this book to John as well while he was here, but there was a book on Psalm 23, which is why we had this read in the beginning. He had this book called something about the shepherd, Psalm 23, and he gave it to me multiple times to read through. And I think the point was, and the family has gotten this across, and John has shared this, was that Carl and Ann were close to the shepherd. Of all the titles that could be given to God, whether it is king, deliverer, rock, shield, none of those metaphors quite nearly describe Jesus in a personal manner as shepherd. Because the shepherd lives with the flock. He is everything to the flock. The provider, the protector, and he is their physician. And the flock is his life. The sheep live because of his care. And I think that Carl wanted John and wanted myself to think of God and Christ in that way as we also were working to shepherd this congregation. I know that those words that David wrote about the shepherd gave Carl and Ann comfort because the God Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth, sustainer of all things, is their shepherd who lives with us, provides for us, refreshes us, and restores our soul. And so today, the celebration, and you've heard it and they've sang about it, the celebration that we share today is because we know that Carl and Ann are in the loving arms of Jesus Christ. And I know that they would want you to know or want you to ask, do you know the shepherd's voice? Have you heard it? They sure did, and I hope you do too. Would you pray with me? Lord, we give you thanks and praise this day for the lives of Carl and Anna Mae Diller. They brought love to a world that knows too much hurt, and kindness to a place that's filled with hate. They brought friendship to people who needed a shoulder to lean on and support of an embracing arm. Lord, we ask that you would welcome them into your eternal home today. In your name we pray. Amen. Would you join me in singing Because He Lives? You find the insert.
God sent his Son, they call him Jesus. He came to love, heal, and forgive. He bled and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my Savior lived. Because he lived, I can face tomorrow. Because he lived, all fear is gone. Because I know we hold the future, and life is worth the living just because he lived. How sweet to hold our newborn baby and feel the pride and joy he gives. But greater still, the calm assurance this child can face uncertain days because he lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. And then one day I'll cross that river, I'll fight life's final war with pain. And then as death gives way to victory, I'll see the lights of glory, and I'll know he reigns. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. And life is worth the living just because he lives.
overshadow you, beneath you to uphold you, before you to guide you, behind you to protect you, and close beside you and within you to make you able for all things, and to reward you both your faith and your faithfulness with the joy and peace that the world cannot give, nor can it take away. Amen. Amen. You are invited for a luncheon right now. If you would exit out those back doors there and make a left and then come down this hall. And right here in our Family Life Center, there's a lunch available for you. Thank you, everyone.